Are you ready to start forming healthy relationships? Well, awesome, then you're in the right place because today we are going to talk about interdependent relationships. Last time we were together, we talked about codependent relationships and some of the signs and behaviors to look for. Today, we're going to flip that coin and look at the other side and see what we're trying to create in a healthy relationship. So this video will be a little bit of a compare and contrast to the codependent video. So you may want to watch that video first. And we're going to define what interdependency is here in a minute because it may be something you've never heard of. I know I had not. Which is really too bad because I think the reason is that we tend to focus so much on what we need to change about ourselves. So we hear a lot about codependency, but then we never focus on what our life is going to look like after we make those changes. And so that's what we're going to do today as we talk about interdependency, is where do we want to get to at the end of the day. So this is a definition from Darlene Lancer, and she is a marriage and family therapist. And I'm going to read it here because I want to make sure that I get it correct. She says, interdependency requires two people capable of autonomy, the ability to function independently. They share power equally and take responsibility for their own feelings, actions, and contributions to the relationship. There is mutual respect and support for each other's personal goals, but both are committed to the relationship. So today I am going to relate this to my relationship with my husband, Dan. And I want to give you some real life examples of the before and after of codependency, because if you watch the codependency video, you know my first marriage. In my first marriage, I was definitely codependent. And I want to show you and give you hope, I guess, that you can change your behaviors and patterns, and you can have different relationships. You don't have to keep repeating the same relationship over and over again. But it's going to take a lot of work, and it's going to require you to be brutally honest with yourself. So I'll give you a little history of Dan and I quickly, or I guess more where I was personally when we met. So when Dan and I met, I had done a lot of work on myself to make sure that I didn't repeat the same mistakes I had in my prior relationship. And this included seeing a counselor regularly. I don't remember exactly how often. It started out once a week and then it became every other week. But I saw a counselor regularly from the second day of my separation with Matt, and I saw her for a full year. And that was huge. I mean, she challenged me to face and accept the part that I had played in the breakdown of the relationship. And she helped me begin to value myself and look out for my own emotional needs. So those two things set me up for being in a more healthy position when I met Dan. Another thing that I did, and I did this on my own, this was not a suggestion of hers. It was about a couple of weeks into the separation from Matt that I actually sat down with my diary and went to the back of it, and I made a list of must-have qualities in a new partner. And the reason being is that I didn't want to repeat the same mistakes. And I just remember thinking to myself, this is a horrible experience, but I have a chance to do it differently next time. What do I need in a relationship to make it different? So, looking back on it now, of course I didn't think this at the time, but I noticed now that that was the first time I really acted as a deliberate thinker and really thought about what I was going to do going forward. And I consulted this list several times while Dan and I were forming our relationship. I know I showed it to him, but I believe I showed it to him on our second or third date, which, if you know me, you're probably not too surprised by that. Why he didn't go running for the hills, I don't know. But the point is that when I met Dan, I knew what I wanted and needed, and I was not willing to accept any less than that. And I think that set the stage for our interdependent relationship. And another big thing is that a reason that we are interdependent is that we have always been equal partners right from the beginning. Where if you watch the codependency video, you know that unfortunately Matt and I were never equal partners. So, to find out what the signs of interdependency are, go ahead and check out the narrative posts. I'm not going to go through each one in the video here, but I'm going to relate them to my relationship with Dan, and specifically I'm going to relate it to his bout with cancer and how we both reacted to that situation. So if you want to learn more about Dan's cancer, he's cancer free now. Hallelujah. He's been cancer free for, oh gosh, a year and a half almost, which is awesome. But if you want to learn more about his bout with cancer, check out the narrative post. I'm not going to get into detail here because I want to focus on the interdependency. But the reason I'm using that as an example is because those are the two most traumatic experiences of my life. And it really shows to me how far I've come. It's a good measuring stick of how I reacted to my separation with Matt and how I reacted to Dan's cancer battle. Completely different reactions. And so I like to look at those to see what my behavior patterns were, to see what the difference was. Okay, enough about that. So when I found out that Dan had cancer, the big thing is I didn't freak out. I didn't fall apart. Which, if you've read the codependency post, you know when Matt and I separated, I almost could not even function. I mean, seriously, my body was in shock, and it was kind of shutting down. It was doing all kinds of weird things. My mind was going nuts. I couldn't sit still. I felt like my skin was crawling. None of that with Dan's cancer diagnosis. And even as I drove to that hospital, because he called me and told me they found something, so I was on my way to the hospital, I just remember thinking to myself, this is going to suck. We are going to be going through some hard times here, but we're going to be okay no matter what happens. Me, the kids, Dan, all of us are going to be okay no matter what happens. I'm going to be a better person when this is all said and done, and we've got this. Let's just do it. So the reason I was able to think this way, and it's kind of a weird way to think as you're on the way to the hospital, but I think it was because I had built a level of healthy self-esteem, which is one of the signs of interdependency, is that you both have a level of healthy self-esteem. And I also think it was because I knew that Dan was not dependent on me. I've never felt that he depends on me fully. I mean, sure, there's certain things in a relationship you depend on each other, but I wasn't worried that I was going to have to be his caretaker and take on his responsibilities. I knew in this battle, this fight, I was going to be his caregiver. I was going to pick up the slack as needed. And I knew we were going to be equal partners in this fight as much as we could be. Obviously, I couldn't actually take on the physical part of the fight, but I knew we were going to fight this together. And I didn't feel an overpowering need to be in control. I did a very good job, and not every day, not every second, but overall I did a very good job of focusing on just what do we need to do today? What's the next step? And not getting too far ahead of myself. So these are all examples of a sign of interdependency, which is that you take personal responsibility for your own behaviors. Another example of my mindset shift from the separation from Matt to this traumatic experience of going through cancer with my husband is, like I said, I never felt like Dan needs me, and so that's made it so that I have not put the burdens of making his decisions on myself. And I've never felt like I need to fix his problems, although he may argue because I like to give him advice a lot. But I guess sometimes maybe I felt like I need to fix his problems, but it's more in a way of giving advice. Not that I think he absolutely has to do what I tell him to do. And so these are all signs that we have established some healthy boundaries, which is another clue that you are in an interdependent relationship. And we support each other, but we do take responsibility for our own actions. And another big thing, another big difference between my relationship now and the way I handled my relationship with Matt is that I don't let things fester too long anymore. Now, I mean, I might think about it to myself a while before I bring it up to Dan, but as soon as I'm ready to, as soon as I've had some time to think about it, we talk about whatever's bothering me. I go to him and we talk about it honestly and brutally, and we get it out. And that's something I did not do with Matt. So, and as I say in the post, nothing could kill a relationship better, more quickly, more efficiently than unspoken resentment. So I think we've done a good job of creating safety for each other to be vulnerable and being open and approachable so that we both can talk to each other about what's going on and what's bothering us. And so those are two more signs of being in an interdependent relationship. And most of the time, this brings out the best in us. Whereas, if you let resentments grow, as I mentioned in the codependency post, you let resentments grow, that is going to bring out the worst in you eventually. Now, I say all this, but I am not trying to sit here and say we're perfect. We are not even close to perfect. We definitely have weak spots in our relationship, but the difference is that I'm aware of them. I think we're both aware of what those weak spots are, and we're not afraid of them. And I can't speak for Dan, but I've made the personal decision that I will not settle for a mediocre relationship. So anytime that I feel like my needs are not being met, we talk about it. And so that's huge. So back to you, though. How do you, now that we've talked about some of the signs of interdependency, how do you become interdependent? Well, first of all, I think you need to figure out who you are and what you want out of life, what you value, and in other words, you need to become a deliberate thinker. So that's why I talk about deliberate thinking so much, because it's the base of everything that's going to make our lives better. Second, you need to be willing to accept the other person for who they are and recognize their strengths and weaknesses and accept those. Third, you need to allow yourself to be vulnerable. You have to take a chance on getting hurt, and you have to allow yourself to be imperfect. Those things are not easy to do, but they are required in a healthy relationship. So there's definitely a lot more to interdependency, codependency, and then I also talk about attachment styles too in another post in this series. A lot more to it than what I'm covering in these posts, but hopefully I've given you a good glimpse into the world of codependency, interdependency, the signs, and some real world examples maybe you can grab onto and relate to your own life. So check out our worksheet too. There's a worksheet that goes along with this video and post that will help you walk through all the signs of interdependency. And until next time, stay curious.